Good morning. Welcome to STL History Live. And our presentation today is See STL Tour Hidden in Plain Sight. I'm Tammy Goldman, the Director of Tourism and Group Sales, but today I'm your host, or more likely the technical assistant today to ensure the program runs smoothly. So as you know, due to the present situation, nearly all of our programming right now is virtual. However, the Missouri History Museum, Soldiers Memorial, and our library are open to visit Wednesday through Sunday. Because your safety is our top priority, the capacity to all the buildings are restricted and we do require advance reservations. All tickets are timed entry, but free. You just need to reserve in advance. So you go to our website, plan your visit, and again, that's at mohistory.org, and you fill out the form and you have your timed entry. Before we begin the program, I want to say a special thank you to those in the audience that are members of the Missouri Historical Society. If it wasn't for you, we would not be able to provide all the programming and exhibits that we are able to do. So thank you so much for all you do for the museum. If you're not a member and are interested, I'll provide a link during the program where you can support the institution. We also appreciate the support from the Zoo Museum Tax District. We sincerely thank the city and county residents of St. Louis for the tax funds that we receive. And let's get into the program. So today's program will run about 30 minutes, followed by a 10 to 15-minute question and answer. You can submit the questions through the Q&A button down below or on your toolbar. You can submit them at any time. And with this program, Amanda does love to interject your questions with her program. So feel free to ask questions throughout. We'll do our best to get to all the questions, but time is important. So we'll, again, try to answer as many or all of them as we can. Today's program is recorded, so if you'd like to view it again or share with others, it will be posted on the Missouri Historical Society YouTube channel in a few days. Lastly, your feedback is very important to us, so we would really appreciate it if you could answer just a few questions for us after the program. You'll note that a Kobo Toolbox survey will open in another tab in your browser, so please keep an eye out for that when you leave this session. So let's get to why you're here today. The program will be presented this morning by Amanda Clark. She's our community tours manager and joined MHS the beginning of the year to help us take our tour programs to new places and really expand what we can offer. We began with the walking tour segment, which Amanda started delivering in July to great success, I might add. However, some of the other programs, specifically the bus programs, have been paused with a great hope that we'll be able to resume sometime next year. In the meantime, Amanda has done the ultimate pivot and created a virtual option that takes you on a journey via your computer screen. So what we're going to provide to you today is an excerpt or a small portion from the full program that she organizes online. For more information about the tour programs of STL Tours, you can find those on our website. And with that, I will let Amanda take it away. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Tammy. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, today's tour is the Hidden in Plain Sight version 2. This is the second Hidden in Plain Sight that we've done. We did one several months ago that took us to hidden boathouses and to hiding daycares that actually, a daycare that actually had huge history, Olympic history in it. And so today I'm going to take you to some familiar sites throughout the city and show you some history that you may not know is hiding there. And I will be able to check the Q&A periodically as we move through. So if I don't answer your question right away, I will check it as we go. I'll do an initial check and all right. And that someone mentioned about the survey that will come up at the end. Okay, our first spot that we're going to go. This is a pretty common place. A lot of people are familiar. This is Grand Center, down at Grand, close to Highway 44. We have Slough off in the distance, and we've got the On God Arts Hotel, and the University Club there with Grand running down the middle, and we're looking south. So I found this image of Grand, of this exact same view at a different point in its history. And so that's that same building where the On God Arts Hotel is, where you see the Missouri Theater there. And in the corner, you see an ad for Sunkissed drinks, Walgreen drugs. And we've got people coming and going, and a stoplight right there in the middle of the street. And so just a fun, so most of those buildings are still in that image, except for that Grand Central Theater off to the left. All right, our next little move, we're going to go downtown. And so this is a pretty common image if you live in St. Louis and you are downtown at Soldiers Memorial Military Museum, which is part of the Missouri Historical Society's fun stuff that we have. And you see the arch in the distance and the Civil Courts building and the Municipal Courts building. And then right in front of you is the Court of Honor. However, if we had been looking right at this view in the early 20th century, this would be what would be sitting right there on that block. And I like using images like this of that part of downtown St. Louis because it shows the density of how many buildings were there, people were living there, the businesses, and just what that felt like. You see streetcar tracks running down the middle there. But yeah, it's a familiar area just with a totally different view. Our next one, we're going to move a little bit out of the city, just a tiny bit. We're going to move over to towards the St. Louis University's medical campus. So this is the intersection of Grand and Chouteau, or Chouteau, depends on who you're. Chouteau is the street name, is how I like to describe it. Chouteau is the street and Chouteau is the family name. If you're not from St. Louis and you're tuning in, Chouteau, the name refers to one of our city's founders. So you're looking north up Grand Avenue towards where we were just earlier, Grand Center. And there's a big prominent intersection. So we're going to travel back in time to this intersection in the 1930s. Interestingly enough, there is still a spot there to grab some lunch. Looks very different. And you've got a guy out there in the middle. We've got streetcar tracks coming and going, just like in our other image. We've got a place, with the big sign that says lunch, and it's a gas station. But if we zoom in on this image, I love this, it says tourist stop, lunch, free road maps. And you can pick up some sandwiches while you're at the gas station. They've got some toasted sandwiches there, 10 cents, 5 cents for coffee. Just found this to be a really fun image. Again, the fact that you can stop there for lunch now, stop there for lunch then, although there won't be a guy in the middle blowing his whistle. So that was the first, just want to kind of give us some fun time travel. And now we're going to do the tour part. So we're going to use Google Maps, move through the city, and to find some different hidden spots. Okay, so we're going to start downtown as we have to every time. And as we move from downtown, we're going to head just a little bit west out to Jefferson Avenue. So we're close to Lafayette Park. And we've got 40 to the north of us here. We're going to scroll just a little bit to kind of give you a view. You're looking north there on Jefferson Avenue. And then we're going to land on this building right here. And this is a building that if you live in St. Louis and you are driving in the city, and just kind of keep panning a little bit to show you the street. If you live in St. Louis and you are in the city driving on Jefferson, this is a building that you might drive past and never once give a second glance to. However, there's huge history here. And this is the Do Good Chemical Laboratories. And the original building was built in 1896. And for the first chunk of its life, for the first 50 years or so, it was a veterinary infirmary building. So now you can imagine the horses and, dogs and different animals that we would not be taking to veterinary clinics in the city now. So this is built in 1896, is a veterinarian hospital. However, in 1945, a new business opens there by a man named Lincoln Do Good. And yes, I called it Do Good Chemical, and that is DU-GOOD. But Mr. Do Good, his last name was DIUGUID. So it's palindrome, so his name can be the same coming and going. And his which is kind of interesting. And then he gives his company name Do Good, but spells it differently. And what the big history that happens here is that Lincoln Dogood is actually the first African-American to graduate with an advanced degree from Cornell. He opens Dogood Chemical Laboratories in 1945. He originally calls it the Chemical Manufacturers. It has several different names throughout its time that it's open, it's open from 1947 to 2011. It's a huge span of time that Mr. Dogood is working out of his laboratories and creating products. He chooses to start his own company when he graduates from Cornell because he gets a job offer right out of college from a really prestigious chewing gum manufacturer, and it's like the perfect job, except they are upfront and they tell him that you're going to have to pass as white. He was very light-skinned. He was African-American. You're going to have to pass as white, and you cannot ever hire any African-Americans to work for you. And so Mr. Dogood took a step back and said, no, we're going to do this differently. And so he started his own company. And when he did this, he was then able to not only create a career for himself, but also to create lots of jobs for other African Americans in science. He could, hire students. He could inspire people and use this, use his company in this way. He invented, but as a scientist, he invented and manufactured the first water-free hand sanitizer. Huge news, right, in 2020. And he invented a method to plasticize aviation fuel, which sounds crazy on many levels. And he also developed many treatments for leukemia and cancer, and just an incredible body of work. He created, contributed to lots of big scientific papers. He was a teacher at WashU and at SLU and at Harris Stowe College for a very long time. And here he is. Let's go back in time a little bit with this building when it was his. And here is this is Louis Dogood here on the left. This is from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. This is him when he was 84. So this would have been in the early 2000s. He actually died in, he did not pass away until 2015 when he was 97. And I've got a little ad there that I found for his hand cleaner, his waterless hand sanitizer that we are using some version of now. And then ad there on the lower right, this is an ad I found from the late 1940s. Just a little paper, little listing in the paper for salesmen. It was fun to read through these, this particular ad, because there was also next to the Encyclopedia Britannica and all these other sales, pardon me, sales opportunities. So that's our first spot on Jefferson. So now we're going to travel somewhere else in the city. So I have a great question here about Mr. Dogood before we move on, about whether he patented his inventions and did he get rich. In the articles about him, his children all went on to be very educated and have amazing careers. So it looks like they invested in that route for the family. His inventions, the big one, the plasticized aviation fuel, was used by companies, but he himself did not get money back from that. And in interviews with him throughout time, he always mentions that he was part of a quiet chemical industry and didn't make a big fortune. So it's a good question. If he did make any money, he was very, it was not something that was talked about in any interviews with him, and something he was pretty humble about. So I hope that answers that. All right, moving on to our next person, and this is one of my very favorite hidden histories. If you go on our Beyond the Ballot Women's History Tour at the Central West End, we will talk about this lady. So if you go on that tour, don't spoil it for the rest of the group. But, and I love her. So we're gonna move from Jefferson Avenue. We're going to start flying. And now we're gonna drop over to the Central West End. Let's see, scroll in here. I'm gonna find a spot that, again, all of us, if you live in St. Louis, if you were driving around the city, this is a place you might drive by and just never give it a second thought, unless you need to run into an ATM, because there is an ATM in this building. And this is the Bank of America building that is on Lindell, just up from the Chase Park Plaza Hotel, right before you turn onto Euclid. I'm gonna show you across the streets, the Holiday Inn, This is that was looking east towards the Cathedral Basilica. So it's a brutalist architecture, architectural building. Again, just a kind of a nondescript modern building that you might pass. But what its history is, it is the home of, and this is the lady who is our history lady right now. This is Gretchen Vanderschmidt, and she moved to St. Louis in the 1930s from Leavenworth, Kansas. And Gretchen is the lady on the left, and then she is in the second photo, she's the lady in the right. And this is a woman who I think needs a statue somewhere in St. Louis or some kind of plaque to all that she did for St. Louisans. So Gretchen Vanderschmidt moves to St. Louis in the 1930s to work at a secretarial school. This is a school, now you would go to a community college or, places to learn administrative assistant skills or, office skills. But this was a whole thing, these secretarial schools for men and for women. So she purchases the secretarial school in 1950, and then she immediately reorganizes it as a nonprofit. And when she reorganizes it as a nonprofit, she creates it to receive support from corporations, like the big ones, Monsanto, Purina, everybody around town gives money to Vanderschmidt Secretarial School, and they train workers from lower income areas, high school graduates, people that wouldn't have opportunities otherwise. And the mission was not just a secretarial school, but as a nonprofit, it worked to end the generational cycles of welfare dependence. It was there to offer job and life skills training. It also had programs for those with disabilities, including special programs for the blind that were very ahead of their time. They would help with job placement for these students, and students with students with different abilities were integrated in the school's programming. They were not kept separate. So even though there were different programs, they were all taught together in the same classes. It was also the first secretarial school in St. Louis to admit Black students, and this was before schools were legally desegregated. And here's an image there on the left of Miss Vanderschmidt working at her school, and some students there on the right. Vanderschmidt herself was highly respected across the country in so many fields of education. And she was the president of a group called Altruza International. So she was the international president of this nonprofit organization, and it has observer status with the United Nations. She gave talks all over the country. She was really active, and she stayed committed to her school. She never married, never had children, and the school closed in the early 2000s, just a few years after she passed away. So yeah, Mrs. Vanderschmidt, not only does she have the world's best name, but she also did this huge thing for St. Louis, for low-income workers, for people, and gave them job opportunities. And yeah, so she's cool. Any questions on Mrs. Vanderschmidt before we move on? Okay, so our next, oh, we got one here. Definitely needs a statue, yes. Or a movie. I mean, it's definitely like Mrs. Vanderschmidt. It just sounds like a Netflix show waiting to happen about this super hard-edged, lady who's teaching people life skills and secretarial skills. And also you could see the change of the job of a secretary throughout time. I think that'd be really fascinating to go through with her. All right, our next spot. Let's move. Let's fly. So from here, we're going to leave the Central West End and head over to the Loop. So we're going to go to University City. And when we get here, we're going to zoom in. We're going to find a really, again, if you live in St. Louis, if you were traveling in St. Louis throughout, this is a pretty common site. And we're going to be looking west up Delmar. So we're in the Loop neighborhood. Can never make the Google Maps guy land the way he's supposed to. So we're looking west up Delmar. So we've got some new construction there. And we're looking at Eastgate. So this right here would be Eastgate, the street, and Westgate's a little bit further up. So let's do our time travel. Oh, we're gonna do that little fly again. There we go. So here's that same view looking up Delmar in the early 20th or early to mid 20th century. And so I want to kind of if you were looking here, this is early, so this picture is mid 20th century. But if we were here in the early 20th century, this is what we would be looking at in this exact spot. And this is before University City has grown as a neighborhood. We would be looking at Del Mar Gardens, so one of the city's largest amusement parks. If you were on Del Mar headed west and you see the street Eastgate and Westgate, those are referring to the race car tracks that were attached to the amusement park. So this history is still connected, right? We can still see little bits of it. Del Mar Gardens, I've got a postcard on the upper left there of the roller coaster, which we'll cover in a moment. The picture in the upper right, you can see the City Hall, the University City Hall, which was originally the women's magazine building, and then the printing press was in the back of there. If you're familiar with University City, if you're looking just to the west of the City Hall, you'll notice how few homes have been built yet in that photo. And in the lower right of that black and white photo, that's the demolished amusement park. So just want to show you exactly where it was sitting. And the term, the loop, it's pretty common St. Louis history knowledge that the loop refers to the fact that a streetcar would turn around there and head back to the city or head back to its terminus. But what it was bringing people out to do was to go to Del Mar Gardens amusement park. So so Del Mar Gardens opened in the early 1900s. It closed in 1919. Throughout its history, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show came. They had events in 1904 that were connected to the fair. There's also a racetrack next to it that I mentioned. But here is my very favorite slide. This is if you take your eyes, it may take your eyes a second to adjust to what you're looking at there. That's a roller coaster that you put your car on. And so you would get locked in somehow and then ride that roller coaster in your car, which is open topped, no windshields there. So yeah, just a completely amazing experience compared to what we have now. So my next slide is another image looking east up Del Mar. At this point, the road looks like it's still kind of dirt, not fully, it's not paved or anything there. And those are some early buildings that would be on the loop. And you have the amusement park to the left. And then you would have Washington University in the far distance. These images are from the University City Public Library's digital collections. They have an incredibly large amount of images of the loop at different stages that are just astounding. It's a good way to lose some time. Okay, I'm gonna look at the Q&A before we move on to our next spot. Did the roller coaster with cars have a specific name? I think it did. It's on one, if everybody can, give me one moment to pass. I think it's on this right here. The Backety Back Railway is listed in that upper postcard there. So if you're Googling it, I would start there because I believe that's the name of it. I'd love to know though if it's not, but I'll give you my contact information. Okay, so let's move on to our next things. We're going to move, let's see, where are we? Okay. So we're going to go from downtown St. Louis out west. We're going to up north. We're going to actually go to Fairgrounds Park, which is in North St. Louis. And when you get up to North St. Louis today, if you were to take Florissant Avenue North, turn left onto Grand, you would pass what looks like this right here. So you would see off of Grand Avenue what's left of these structures here. And a lot of people, when we take our bus tours or things up there, they see these and they're like, oh, it's the bear pits from the St. Louis Zoo that used to be here. Yes, and that's pretty common and common knowledge for a lot of historians. And here's an image of what was there. The bear pits are part of a much bigger thing. And here's all the different structures that were in Fairgrounds Park, and that refers to a yearly fair that was held there for a long time. They had a bandstand, they had racetracks, they had all kinds of stuff here. Now we're going to move, and here's one of the structures that was in there that held over one of the largest. It was the Jockey Club. It was one of the largest in the country. It could hold almost 100,000 people in the entire facility there. But here's the zoo part. So back to those, they didn't just have bear pits. They have several other zoo structures. And so we have the aviary structure here, would have had birds, big bird cage. Here's an image of the gardens that were in front of the bear pits. The bear pits are in the far distance there. And again, this corner looks so different now at Grand and Natural Bridge. This is what's called the Carnivora House. So it's what had the lions and the tigers in it. Again, this was at Fairgrounds Park, not Forest Park. Here's the Monkey House. Gorgeous structure there. And this is the Art Museum, or what would have been a version of the Art Museum. Would have had art inside and sculptures, and for some reason on that day they had tombstones out front. Must have been some kind of sculpting class or just demonstration. So there's the Art Museum that was in Fairgrounds Park. And this is something, I cover this in one of the virtual tours, the Whole Lot of St. Louis virtual tour, and we go into much more depth into this. But it's just kind of cool to see, because again, those bear pits are so, everybody sees paper does stories on the bear pits and it's kind of a thing, but there's all these other structures that were there and all these other animals. Okay, let's move to our next spot. Maybe, let's see. I think this is where I was meant to earlier to take us. Okay, nope. Now we're going to go into South St. Louis, just south of downtown, into an area that would, if you go now on our walking tour of Soulard, we talk about Kosciuszko. So Kosciuszko was a neighborhood right across Broadway from Soulard. It had very similar architecture, density. It was a whole neighborhood of people that worked there and worked in these factories. And what the building that we're looking at there is called Crunden Martin. And Crunden Martin is a St. Louis business that was around for most of the 20th century. And they made everything from hats for soldiers for World War II to spoons, and they made wooden spoons and metal spoons, and they made all kinds of housewares during the war efforts. This is an image that we have in the Historical Society archives, images of the hats being made and sent out. But they're big, what I think is a fascinating lost piece of manufacturing history for St. Louis is that Crunden Martin was also a manufacturer of top flight paper kites, and they were a world distributor of these paper kites. Crunden Martin made them, and then Top Flight was also one of the largest competitors, both of them in St. Louis. So for a good chunk of the late 20th century, St. Louis was where the majority of the world's paper kites were manufactured. They were manufactured just south of where the arch was, manufactured and sent out. And that lasted into the almost early 2000s, and then the plant closed. And now the buildings are abandoned and they are in quite a state of disrepair, but you can walk around there and get some really good urban exploration time in, if you like to do that. I do. It's right next to a church called St. Mary of Victories. It's a Hungarian church. There's a lot of good history there to wander around. And again, that's just south of the arch on Choteau, headed down to the river. All right, looks like I'm just made my time for 11:30. I would love to answer any questions you have. This felt like it went these always go so fast. If you enjoyed doing this, the virtual tours that we do, that my program does, the STL, they last about an hour and a half. And so we're able to go much deeper, and they're very interactive, and we can chat about a lot of stuff. And the next one that we're about to debut, we have a brand new one coming out in November that's called St. Louis Underground. And it is all about caves and sinkholes and tunnels and the river Des Peres that runs underneath the city, and just what's under our feet, and what's happening just a few feet below us all the time. People are always so fascinated with the caves, and I wanted to go past that, and see some other things. So the contact info for the virtual tours, you can go to STL. Let's see if I know how to do this. So I think I had to type it. Oh yeah. So to do the CSTL tours, you go to mohistory.org/CSEE-STL. And they're also on the front page of mohistory.org. You just go to CSTL tours, and we are in the process of publishing November's schedule right now. So those virtual tours are on there, as are the walking tours, which we are doing as long as it stays, even if it's cold, we'll still be out there doing walking tours, and we can do those for private groups, or you can join one of our public tours. I'm not sure why you're the only one asking questions. That happens sometimes. I appreciate all the questions. They make my job much more fun. All right, well, sounds like we're done. And if you would like to send me any questions directly, or have any questions about the programs, about anything I talked about today, if you want to add to it, if you know something more about any of them, I'd love to hear it. My contact information is aclark@mohistory.org. And I'm going to move it now to this is should have the links to be able to take the survey there. And that shows some of the talks that are coming up in the next few weeks as well. So, and thank you everybody for coming and listening this morning. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, these will be recorded and put on YouTube soon. And please take the survey and give us any feedback that you have. Thanks.